Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. I want to welcome you back to another episode as we saunter, Greg, we're sauntering our way through our collection, and we have worked our way through reconnaissance and reconnaissance airplanes and unmanned drones with last week's Predator, and now we're moving on to helicopters. Now, do not despair. We have a ton of aircraft ahead of us still and a lot of heavy metal. So keep looking forward to those episodes. But right now we're going to get into helicopters. And we're going to start with the Bell 47. But before I do that, Greg has, I think, outdone himself with my hair is on fire, Greg, perhaps. I actually know what this is, Greg. This is my kids. This is Dragon Ball Z, I think. You can go out and look that up. But I think Greg is having me look like a Japanese animated character. I appreciate that, Greg. So we're going to go ahead and take this off. Greg, of course, today is my phantasmagoric assistant. Something like that. I had fun with that one, Greg. Phantasmagoric assistant. I've taken a shot at it. Greg can throw it up. He is just making me pay this week. Things were getting a little too sedate for Greg, so we stepped it up a notch on the headgear, and then phantasmagoric, something like that. Anyways, Greg can throw it up. I have no idea what it means. I hope it is fitting for Greg Kenny. So we're talking about the Bell 47 today. Now, we're moving into helicopters. Remember, we had all those light airplanes, and we had drones that kind of took over from them. But what we were moving into is reconnaissance, medevac, and ultimately offensive capability of aircraft that don't need airstrips. I mean, and that really came into its own in the Vietnam War with the air cav and air cavalry, with the Huey, of course, and the Cobra. But we're going to go back, and we're going to go all the way back to the 1480s. The 1480s, Greg, because we're stepping back into the earliest known designs for anything that could resemble a helicopter, a rotary wing aircraft, was Leonardo da Vinci. And what he came up with was a thing called the aerial screw, which is kind of spun around, and Greg can throw that up. But obviously, they didn't have the technology to make it work. Da Vinci kind of thought about all kind of interesting designs, but he couldn't make it work. But so we stepped up to the turn of the century, and there were a number of innovations. There's French and Germans, primarily on the Europeans. There were some American innovations, but really we go back to the familiar suspect, Greg, the Germans. We're back to the Germans again, who came up with the Focke-Wulf FW-61 in 1936, which was the first operational military helicopter. And then the Germans during the war actually deployed the FL-265 and the FA-223, which were both helicopters, and they actually deployed in a military operational role. But the Germans were being bombarded so heavily that they could never deploy either one of those aircraft in any sufficient numbers. Enter the Americans and a guy by the name of Arthur Young. Now, Arthur Young had built in the early 40s and a little earlier, he had built a lot of prototype models.
Well, my first attempt at a helicopter was based on the idea of pulling a big rotor around with little propellers on the blade, on the tips. And I tried it with rubber band models, and it worked, and I could even make it move horizontally by having ailerons that turned cyclically, and it would move horizontally. On the basis of that, I went to a larger model, still not full scale, but heavily loaded, 20 horsepower, compacted into a 10-foot rotor, made intense stresses. But I wanted to study the stresses, and I really found them even greater than I thought I would.
Models, and Greg can find those of helicopters, and then they stepped it up. Now Bell Aircraft was formed in 1935 by Lawrence Dale Bell, if you can believe that. No relation. Now, and Arthur Young got involved with them, and he took some of his early kind of model helicopter designs, and they rolled that into a full-scale prototype, which was called the Bell 30 prototype. That was really the first kind of working operational helicopter for Bell aircraft. Of course, you know Bell, and we've talked about the P-39 and the P-63, but we're into rotary wing aircraft now. And so Arthur Young did that. Now, Arthur Young is an interesting guy. He was a philosopher. He did a bunch of other stuff. You can go out and look at him on Wiki. One of the things about Arthur Bell was, Greg, in a technical term, he was also maybe a little kooky. Okay, but he had a lot of problems with use of nuclear weapons and the thought about nuclear weapons, and he was a philosopher, and he had a lot of other stuff, but he was also this kind of ingenious inventor, and he's a guy who really started the groundwork that started the Bell 47. So I'm going to pick up my very small, Greg, we're on a budget again, helicopter, my little Bell 47. Now there are different types of this aircraft. We're going to cover them all today. We're not going to get into a specific type, but the basic design had either a Lycoming or a Franklin engine that was about 178 to 305 horsepower in here. Very lightweight tube design. I'm going to take this off. If this, by the way, if this comes off, do you know what holds on the rotor on a helicopter, Greg? The technical term? The Jesus nut. So if you lose the Jesus nut, what happens? You go to see Jesus. So I'm going to take the rotor off. Well, they didn't take the Jesus nut off of this one, but so you had the motor in here, gas tank, controls up front, a bubble canopy. This was kind of the first really practical military helicopter for the United States. It was also certified for civilian use, Greg, in 1946, if you can believe that. It was built under license as well. This thing was really prolific in the 50s. It was built under license by either Augusta or Kawasaki Heavy Industries, so it was prolific across the board. Now, Bell Aircraft, they started this. They went on, they said they were formed in 1935. They actually became part of Textron in 1960, and they've continued to go on. But their basic learning experience with these types of aircraft really started with the Bell 30 and then into the Bell 47. Now, in military terms, this was used as the H-13, or designated as the H-13 Scout.
Army aviation has many different functions, but all of them are part of the land battle. All of them are designed purely and simply to help the combat soldier win on the battlefield. Though soldiers have taken to the air, they remain just as much a part of the infantry, artillery, or armor as they were before becoming aviation specialists. The Army's aircraft are simply a better and faster means of moving from one place to another and getting a job done.
This one here is set up as a MASH helicopter. And Greg, I don't know if you have the helicopter in the shot, but you can pan up, and that is where in the where this aircraft became famous was as a medevac, emergency medevac, because it could carry 2 litters. Remember, in those single-seat fixed-wing airplanes, they could put a litter along the fuselage, but this one you could actually get 2 litters in it. Greg can get a better shot of that, a full-size one. But these went to MASH units. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with MASH units, but the idea behind the evolving military doctrine in helicopters as it went to the U.S. Army and to getting casualties out of theater in the Korean War was that you only had, I think, Greg, they want to call it, or we call it the golden hour. They had a certain period of time that if they didn't get the casualty to an aid station, the fatality went way up. The percentage went way up of the person dying. So they wanted to get the injured personnel to the aid station, these MASH units, or these medical units, as quickly as possible, and that's where the helicopter came in. They didn't need a runway. They could just come in and land, vertically, and they could come in and they could take the folks off. They could go away. Now, this thing had no armor. as you can tell. It had no armor, very little protection. So this was very rudimentary. But if you're a wounded soldier and you've got to get to an aid station, you really don't care about any of that. You want to go and get treated. So the Bell 47, under the H-13 Scout designation, was really pivotal in the Korean War in getting these wounded soldiers to medical aid. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this down because I want to talk about my stage 2 today. Now Greg has, I don't know if you need to get a shot of this label, but this label is hilarious. This is Greg has really stepped up his game in the hat. This is in honor of the Korean War or the Korean conflict, and we're covering that with these MASH units. Greg has come up with Doomsday Lemonade. It's quite interesting. It kind of looks like, I don't know if you can get a shot of that, but it kind of looks pretty nasty in the bottle, maybe nuclear radiation in there. It's Taste the Apocalypse is the tagline, and it has Kim Jong-un on it, the leader of North Korea, and of course he has a name tag that says, "Hello, my name is Rocket Man." So this is, whoever did this had a real sense of humor. 170 calories, typical suspects. There is no sell-by date, and I think this is like rocket time soda. So this could be pretty dangerous, Greg. But if you get a shot, you should throw the label up because I think they'll enjoy it. What I want to do today is I want to salute all of the medevac pilots. It started in the Korean War. In the Vietnam War, it even got more pronounced, and even in any of the conflicts since then. Getting these casualties in these helicopters and getting them medevaced out is critical to saving lives. And these folks, I mean, it doesn't really matter the conflict, but they fly in getting shot at. They're getting shot at going out. Some of them lose their lives trying to save these wounded service members. And it all goes back to those Bell 47s in Korea that were out there really doing the cutting edge stuff. So if you're a medical evac pilot or medical aircrew evac personnel, God bless you, and we're going to salute you today. Now I'm going to take I don't have a twist off this week, right? So we'll put down the magnetic, non-magnetic can opener, and we will see what this thing tastes like. Okay, Greg, we've jumped off. We had a couple of good ones. Oh man, this is definitely Doomsday Lemonade. It is made from atomic wastewater, I think. They're very nasty. Greg is laughing. You cannot see him. I am going to get you on camera one of these days and get your reaction. Oh man, the finish is even worse. Oh, I may have to get a Geiger counter to make sure that I'm not injured with that. That's nasty. We're going to sit that down, and maybe Greg can get a shot of the label and throw it up there. So this set the stage, and as I said, in 1946 for civilian use, and it just progressed on. Now, a couple of other interesting things with this is that in 1949, the type set an altitude record of 18,000 feet in this. Can you imagine going 18,000? I can't imagine going 18,000 feet in that. In 1950, it was the first helicopter to fly across the Alps, this type. And then in 1952, it set a distance record of 1,200 miles that as of the 2018, that record still stands. You can believe that, a point-to-point distance record. So that's kind of interesting that it still holds a couple of records, but it's really, really cool stuff. And this particular example, I'm going to put that down, we'll kind of look up. This particular example was a pile of parts. This was rebuilt by our restoration department, and it was a pile of parts out in the desert. We had a donor call us on it, and we actually completely rebuilt it. So very exciting that we did that. Now, if you're going to fly up at 18,000 feet, Greg, what do you need? You need a very nice but lightweight, because obviously every ounce counts when you're ounce counts. I'm rhyming, Greg. I'm doing really well today. Every bit counts, and this is the thing. I'm not sure it would keep you warm at 18,000 feet, but it'll definitely cut the cold. And you can go out and actually get this on the link, or go out to the website, and Jason in our gift shop will be happy to send you a wonderful version of this. It actually has although that's our old logo, Greg, we have to get the new logo, but we have this, and we can send this to you, and there's a couple of different color variations on it, but you go out to our website and get that. Now, the other thing, and this is a Fred fun fact, is that NASA used these helicopters a lot as trainers. And they used them as trainers for the lunar landers. And they would modify the controls, and they would have the astronauts go out and use them to test approaches for the lunar module, if you can believe that, in the Apollo program. Now, one Apollo astronaut got into a little bit of trouble. And this is not uncommon. As you're coming down to the water, when you're on the surface of the water, there are times when you can lose spatial perception as to where the surface of the water is and where you're at. And Gene Cernan got down low and lost his kind of relation to the surface of the water, and he actually crashed the Bell 47 into the water, and he actually went down with it. He actually got out. I believe this was in 1972, but he actually crashed it in a training mission. Now, James McDivitt, who was the colonel and who was managing the Apollo program at that time, the spacecraft program at that time, was so, I can't use any other term, but pissed off over the whole thing, and felt that he shouldn't have done that and that he had screwed up as a pilot, that he actually asked for Gene Cernan to not be put on Apollo 17. And what happened was they refused, the flight director refused, and McDivitt resigned over that. So that's kind of a Fred fun fact, though that's not fun, but McDivitt actually, we got a fine aviation product working its way out over there, but McDivitt actually resigned over that, if you can believe it. And now, Cernan went on. He was on Apollo 17, and he was the last human being to stand on the surface of the moon. He was the last guy on the surface of the moon. So he went on and went ahead with that, but he nearly was killed in this when he was out doing test flights to try to learn how to fly the lunar module. So we're going to go down helicopter lane now. We've got a bunch of them. We have some Bell products. I think we have a Sikorsky product in there as well. We're going to work our way until we get back into some of the heavy metals, some of the fighters. I want to thank you for joining us today. My name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. We're very happy you joined us today. Now, don't forget, hit that subscribe button, like us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and remember that, as I said, this was a pile of parts sitting in the desert that we restored to the point that we look like it can fly. We need those donations to keep that happening. So hit that donation button, make a donation so we can keep them flying. Again, I thank you very much for joining us today. Have a great day.